It was a cold night in June of 1893. A young lawyer sat quietly inside a first-class railway compartment, traveling across South Africa on business. He wore a neat suit. His papers were in order. His ticket was valid. He had every right to be there. But not everyone on the train believed that. Another passenger entered the compartment and immediately objected. The lawyer, he insisted, did not belong in first class. A railway officer soon arrived. The demand was simple: move to the baggage car. The young man refused. He had paid for a first-class ticket. He was a professional, a lawyer representing a client. He believed that reason and the law would prevail. Instead, the official called for help. Moments later, the lawyer was physically forced off the train at the next station. His luggage was thrown beside him, and the train pulled away. And he was left standing alone on a dark platform in the middle of winter. At the time, it was simply one humiliating incident among many faced by non-white residents living under the racial discrimination of colonial South Africa. But something about that moment felt different. The young lawyer later wrote that he spent the night in the station's waiting room, shivering and reflecting. He had a choice to make. He could return home to India. He could abandon the legal case that had brought him there. Or he could stay and challenge the injustice he had just experienced. That night, the lawyer made a decision. He would stay. Up to that point, his life had been relatively ordinary. Born in India in 1869, he had studied law in London before accepting a one-year contract to work for an Indian merchant in South Africa. The job was meant to be temporary, but the discrimination he encountered was impossible to ignore. Indian and African residents faced restrictive laws, travel limitations, and constant humiliation. Many were denied basic rights. The train incident became a turning point. Instead of returning quietly to legal work, the young lawyer began organizing. He helped form political associations. He wrote petitions. He encouraged peaceful protest against discriminatory laws. Over time, his philosophy began to take shape. He believed injustice should be resistant, but not with violence. Instead, he argued that moral force, civil disobedience, and nonviolent resistance could expose injustice and compel change. The idea was radical, and it would reshape political movements across the world. For more than 20 years, he continued organizing campaigns in South Africa, advocating for the rights of Indian residents. Eventually, he returned to India. There, his ideas grew into a national movement. Millions joined him in peaceful protests against British colonial rule. Salt marches, boycotts, acts of civil disobedience. His philosophy of nonviolent resistance would inspire civil rights leaders around the world, including Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela. And it all traces back to that moment on a cold railway platform. The young lawyer forced off the train that night was Mahatma Gandhi. One humiliating act of discrimination became the catalyst for a global movement built on nonviolence and moral courage. History often remembers the marches, the speeches, the revolutions, but rarely the quiet moment that started it all. A train ride, a refusal to move, a night spent alone on a station bench, and a decision that injustice would not go unanswered. Sometimes the moments that feel smallest, the private humiliations, the quiet turning points, shape the course of history in ways no one could imagine. Because sometimes the train that throws you off is the one that puts you on the path to change the world. This has been Twist of Fate Radio. I'm Angela Clark. Until next time, remember, sometimes the smallest choices lead to the biggest consequences. Want to explore more stories like this? Visit twistoffateradio.com. There you can read more details about this story and others like it. Plus, you can submit your own Twist of Fate story to be considered for a future episode. You never know what twist of fate is coming next.